How you guys doing? Welcome back to the channel. I'm glad you're here. Gonna be a little fan noise in the background because it's hot and muggy in the shop today, but I got a couple things I'm gonna do on the project truck today you might be interested in, so stay tuned. We're gonna be doing a little bit of tinkering. I gotta get the old cluster out of there. I got a new instrument cluster from Intellitronics, and it uses electrical sending units. The factory cluster, it's got mechanical temperature and mechanical oil pressure, which means there's a little tiny plastic tube that runs from the engine to the gauge in the dash. And those are kind of cool, being old school mechanical, but you get a little leak, you lose oil, you're disabled. That hose gets cut because it goes through a hole, which it happens to go through a hole that doesn't have a rubber grommet around it. So that plastic tube rubs on that little hole. Eventually you get an oil leak. You can't drive your vehicle home unless you find a way to pinch off that oil pressure line. And it has 50-60 pounds of oil pressure at speed, so good luck with that. So we're going modern. We're going to put electrical sending units in. We're going to take the mechanical stuff out of there for now. I'm not going to put the cluster in this video. This is just so I can go to the next step, take the old cluster out of my way, start working on wiring and the steering column and all. I don't have the windshield in the truck yet. As you can see, the windshield's not in the truck yet. I mentioned earlier we broke it trying to put it in. A little aggressive slaps. It can't handle it. You got to just basically give it love taps and a little more than love. And once you get to where there's any kind of anger involved in the smack, it breaks. So that's what happened to ours. I can't find anybody that'll do classic car glass, at least not mobile. So I'm working on that. I got another windshield already ordered. We may try to do it again ourselves, a little gentler, but we'll see what happens with that. I don't want to put the cluster and the new steering column and all in there with no windshield in it, because the boss was tired of me using the bay for my truck, and I don't blame him. It's been in here a while, so in reality, I appreciate the amount of time I've been able to keep it in here, but it's got to go outside during the day in case we need the spot. They're trying to add mechanics and make more money, of course. So right now, my truck's just sitting in here out of the weather, tying up work area. So basically, the bottom line is I got to get the glass in it ASAP, and we can go a lot further on the truck and get it out of the shop, and everybody's happy, right? I just wish it was easy to find a glass guy or to get the glass in this thing, and it's not. Let's get these sending units swapped out. We can get the cluster out of the dash the rest of the way, get it out of our way. Now, this truck does run and drive. Some of you may have seen the videos. I have a short where I run it, and it actually runs really good. The motor's super strong. It's all fresh and brand new. That's one of the main reasons I bought the truck. I didn't want to have to build a motor for it. And I kind of like the old school small block. I've had LS's in a couple of my project vehicles. Kind of happy to go with the old school small block, especially a 4-bolt main 350 that's bored over, all fresh inside. I did put an oil pan gasket on it to fix an oil leak, so I know for a fact it's all brand new and 4-bolt mains inside. Pretty happy about that. Let's get these sending units in there and get rid of this mechanical stuff. This has a mechanical capillary tube that goes to the gauge. And back here you can see the oil pressure tube, which is just kind of wrapped around stuff, rubbing on things. It's going to leak eventually and let go. So we're getting it out of there, and that new cluster is going to be real fancy. No worries about springing leaks and things like that. So let me grab some tools. They also say do not use Teflon tape or any kind of sealant on these threads because the ground has to pass from the temperature sender to the adapter to the manifold and get a good engine ground. Because the way this works is as the temperature changes, the resistance changes. So it has to have a good ground so that when it goes from cold to hot, as the resistance changes, the gauge works. If you put Teflon tape on there thinking you're going to seal it, not only does it really hardly ever do anything, the threads themselves are like pipe threads. They seal themselves pretty well. It also interferes with your connection. And you end up with a 70% of the ground or 50% of the ground, so everything doesn't read correctly. Bottom line is, we're shoving it in dry. So let's get some tools and stop yapping. Now while I take this oil gauge hose off and the adapters for it, you're probably not going to be able to see much, so I'll show you ahead of time what it looks like. Hopefully that's coming up on camera there. That brass piece that has the T's to it and all. Looks like they use brake line T's and stuff, which is fine. Anything that can handle brake pressure will handle oil pressure, right? As long as you get it to seal. So I've got some 7/16, 3/8, and 1/2-inch wrenches going there. I'm going to want to loosen the fitting that squeezes. What they do is they put a little brass ferrule on the line, and when you tighten it up, there's 2 tapered sides, and it squeezes the brass ferrule so the hose gets compressed and it can't pull out. So I just got to loosen that so it'll be able to spin. and then I can take that line out of the way and spin that big chunk of brass out of there. I'm hoping I don't have to move the distributor or mess with any of that, because the motor runs really good. I don't want to have to mess with the timing and all at this point. Anyway, let me go ahead and pull that out of there. I got coolant in here. I haven't drained the coolant yet. It's going to probably spill a little bit, but if I leave the radiator cap on the radiator, that will be the only leak. It won't want to pour a ton of coolant out. If I take the radiator cap loose, then I'll lose a lot more coolant. So what I'm going to do is, I got my new parts in hand, keep them right nearby. Just going to break this loose so the adapter will spin without turning it. Yeah. This is 7/8. So now you see it's not trying to force it because I loosened it, so the seat can move. Now if I go quickly enough, I won't lose a ton of coolant. So it kind of stops because it gets to a point where the atmospheric pressure and the pressure in the cooling system match. It stops spilling coolant. Now these are pipe threads, so it'll get to where it feels like it's snug, but it's not. You gotta go a little more. So I go pretty snug, a little bit more, and then when I'm done, I'll just check it for leaks. This is a 5/8. This is a 7/8. The fittings are always 7/8. I believe this is 12 millimeter because I snugged this up the same way. Not quite as tight as I made the big adapter. This is 1/8 NPT thread, and I believe this is 5/8 or ½ inch, I think. I can't remember. I think I used to order these things for my race car, street car stuff, and it's been a while ago. I'm going to rinse that off with some water. I'm going to leave it just like that. I'm not hooking anything up because I haven't put the cluster in yet, right? I'm going to get the oil sender next. Here's what it looks like. It came out, fit under the distributor. I'll show you what this other side of this line looks like. It's shoved under the steering column and stuff for some reason. I don't understand, but if you're putting these mechanical lines in your vehicles, don't do it this way. That's all I'm going to tell you. You definitely do want to route this away from heat, and you want to route away from anything sharp. Keep the installation as simple as possible. It should have been a little clasps or something on the firewall holding it. But anyway, if you can see that, it's a little tapered bushing. That's what pinches the hose and keeps it from leaking. And this little nut squeezes it in place. And this has a taper opposite it. So it just goes together like that. If you ever have problems with these leak-in and things like that, that's usually because this hasn't quite been tightened enough. Now, if you over-tighten this, it could actually crush that tube and you won't get much oil pressure. It'll look like it's low. It'll take forever for your gauge to respond and that kind of thing. That means that's too tight. So I could have just cut this apart, but I kind of want to save it. You never know if you're going to use it for some other project someday or something. Who knows? So I try not to destroy things if I can avoid it. Now I'm going to get the sending unit in there. You can see this has the same thread. I did put one, I went around with Teflon tape, 1 revolution. And what I do is, if this thing's going to thread in right-hand thread like normal, you want to wrap the Teflon tape around right-hand thread with the threads facing you. Wrap it around right-hand thread. That way when it ends and you pull off your little piece, the tape is wrapped in that direction. When you turn it in, it won't be trying to unwrap the tape, if that makes sense. That's how I do it. If you go the wrong way, it'll try to unwrap the tape as you screw it in. So, and this barely fits in there. So again, I'm going to dive in next to the distributor there. The 1/8 NPT. You can use Teflon tape on this sender because it has a ground and a signal. So you're actually putting a ground on this side with an eyelet to the firewall or chassis or whatever, engine block. So you don't have to rely on this to ground. You can put Teflon tape on it and not mess with that. I'm going to go ahead and get it in real quick. We'll come back. Just in case, I don't think I mentioned it. I took a Sharpie and I made the ground and signal a little bit easier to see, and I also added positive for signal and negative for ground, just because it's going to be hard to see down in there once this is in, right? All right, let me stick it in. That didn't sound right. All right, well, I got a little bit of a problem. My oil sending unit bottoms out on the intake manifold. I think it's made for a stock manifold, or they expect you to just get adapters if it doesn't fit, basically. But I happen to have some fittings and stuff around. I put some Teflon tape on these to get them ready. What this will do is raise that sender up, and I turn this till it's facing basically away from the distributor, and then I'll be able to screw my sending unit into this. I use my little baby Craftsman. It's got a nice thin jaw in the front so I can get the center tight, but I started feeling it dragging, and then I realized the housing's touching the aluminum manifolds. Anyway, We'll pop it back out of there. We'll put this in. I'll show you what that looks like when I get it done. All right, guys, I got it in there. Got the sending unit in. You can see where it's at a 45-degree angle now. That little adapter kind of gets it away from the distributor and the manifold, and I had to make sure it doesn't get in my throttle linkage, which I'm not really in love with that throttle linkage setup either, so we might mess with that later on. This truck needs a lot of work, and there are a lot of things that are going to come way before that throttle linkage. It doesn't bind or stick. I don't know if it gets full throttle or not. I'm not really that worried about it. I'm not going to take this thing to the track, so what does it matter if I'm getting 91% throttle? But I'll start pulling some of these tubes out and wires out. I've been cutting wires that were just, there was a bunch of wires just hanging there not connected to anything. I don't know what they were for, maybe the tack or something like that, but all that's coming out. I got a tack in the new cluster and all. So one of the things I'm going to do here next is, once I get the windshield in, of course, is put my steering column in. Like I mentioned earlier, I need to figure out exactly what my measurements are going to be, my dimensions for connectors. There's only a few really popular steering column sizes, like 36 spline, double D shafts, round 3/4 inch shaft, round 5/8 shaft. I got to measure this one and see what diameter it is. I know I got an I Did It steering column with tilt and stuff like that. I know that's double D, which is basically an oval. It's got two flats. It looks like two letter D's put together, if that makes sense. That's where the name comes from. If you put one letter D in a backwards one and connect them, that's what it looks like. And it's pretty universal as far as the size goes. This looks like 3/4 inch, but 0.750, which is 3/4 of an inch, right? If 1/4 is 0.250, half is 0.500, 3/4 is 0.75, and 4/4 is 100 or 1 inch, right? A little math for you, no extra charge. 3/4 of a thousandths. So I know what I need to order, because the new steering column will probably end around there. It already has a collapsible GM steering shaft on it. There's some kind of a hokey setup they made to hold the steering box, but it's made out of 1/4 inch steel. It looks pretty solid, so I'm not too concerned about it. I'm going to see how the truck drives. If the steering feels wonky, I'm going to change that steering box and the bracket. It almost looks like it came from a right side drive car, because the Pitnam shaft faces out the bottom, but the mounting bolts are on the outside. And they made a bracket to bolt to the frame and come around and bolt up to the outside. Could be because it's a pickup truck steering box that went on the inside of the frame. What you really need is a steering box that mounts on the outside of a frame. So for the application, probably would have been better to go with a different steering box. But like I said, I'm going to live with it, see how it goes, and swap it out later if I have to. My steering column and connection won't be affected by that. It has a rag joint at the bottom. I'm gonna put a universal joint up here. I'll go with a double D universal joint right on the bottom of the steering column into this 3/4 inch round. You can even use a grinder. I've ground down the round bar to make it into double D so it fits nice. You got to be real careful with that and sneak up on it. You want it nice and tight. You don't want to play with steering. That's where we're at with that. I know what I need to order. We're not going to do the steering column in this video, but there'll be a video on it soon. Once I get the windshield in and the doors on, then I feel like it's safe to start putting sensitive, my cluster, my steering column, all the stuff that I don't want to get all corroded in the weather. It rains pretty bad out here every day, just like it did a little while ago. Go ahead inside the truck, start pulling the old cluster out of this girl. Get this cluster out of here. Apologize if the lighting isn't that great. We just had some clouds rolling in, so that is gonna mix things up for a bit. I'll show you guys what we got. Let me go get some other lights and I'll show you what this looks like in here. Ooh, it's quite the mess. I got a wiring harness too, no worries. We're gonna change it all out. Sometimes when you're beyond the point of no return, patching things that have been patched 100 times and not even patched correctly, you're just better off starting over, right? Let's get some lights. Some of these wires are short, some of the wires are long. There's my sending unit. Now, I could just start cutting and hacking stuff up, but again, you never know if you're going to need any of these components or connectors or things of that nature, so I try to disassemble everything and be a little patient. And that's the sending unit I unbolted from the engine. The oil sender, they had routed through a little 1/4 inch hole in the dash and then put the fitting on, so I ended up having to cut that little crimped doodle off, and I just screwed it into the piece I took out, the big adapter. So I'll have all that stuff if I need it for anything. All right, there's a bunch of bulbs. If you're working on your truck and you're watching this video to see about cluster information, and which is what this video looks like it's going to mostly be about, I just wanted to point out these bulbs, most of them don't matter where they go. So what you do is you turn your parking lights on with the key off, and all of the bulbs that light up with the parking lights go in the capsule areas that light up the cluster so you can see it at night. The only bulbs that matter where they go is one of the bulbs is going to be for your alternator, key on, engine off, and possibly oil pressure if you have a dummy light for oil pressure. They call it a dummy light because by the time it comes on the damage is done. But anyway, so what you can do is turn your key on. Your oil pressure and alternator light are going to be the only ones that's a little tough to figure out. So if you're going to take the cluster out, put it back, make notes on those bulbs before you take it apart. And the rest of the bulbs just come on with your parking light. So it looks like a lot to remember, but only 2 of them aren't parking lights, you know what I mean? I've been unbolting the nuts and stuff here trying to get this wiring out of my way. This one, they just had this wire shoved under there with no end on it. That's the kind of stuff the whole truck, you know. Something this old, it's been worked on by 10 different people or 20 different people over the years, maybe more. And some of them don't really care too much about the end result. As long as they get it out, get it working or whatever, they don't care. When I do something like this, because I do it professionally, I have to offer some kind of warranty, and I also have nightmares about stuff coming back that I did wrong. So makes you into a better mechanic when you care that much. That's why I'm not wealthy. I've done my whole career that way, trying to do things as good as I could. And then if I make a mistake, it's because I'm human, not because I didn't care, if that makes sense. I sleep good at night. I believe I can take every single wire out of this dash if I want. But when it comes to moving the truck and all, I don't want to disable the ignition. I want to be able to run it. So at least the cluster's out now. That's the good news. What an ugly mess. It's got aftermarket gauges and it fit in there so it looks like factory gauges. It's pretty funny. All right. I do need the cluster bezel. My new cluster doesn't come with the bezel. It's the only thing that makes me a little sad about it. Teletronics has probably one of the best deals in a dash that gets good reviews at least. That's what I went with. I wish it would come with a bezel, or at least if they offered an option for one, because now I'm gonna have to strip this down and paint it and hope it comes out looking halfway decent around my brand new $650 instrument cluster. At least that's what it cost when I bought it. Things have gone a little crazy the past year, and I bought it a while ago. Sometimes they'll have sales, $100 off and things, and that's when I bought it. I'm not sure what it costs nowadays, but this is all I really need. That's all I really need out of that. And that's some heavy pot metal cast alloy, it feels like. All right, it's starting to rain out there pretty heavy now. Hopefully my remote mic's working pretty good, but I'll show you why this cluster is being replaced. You see all the aftermarket gauges from the back. It doesn't look quite so terrible, but I'm not going to throw it away just in case for a little while. But this obviously is all splintered and blistering, not really much good. You can buy these pretty inexpensively, I think about 70 bucks or so. And this thing here, it has been hacked up and butchered. When you look up close, you can see the amount of debauchery that went on to get that gauge in there. The gauge itself looks decent. The battery gauge also hacked into that thing and messed up. And you can see there's actual rust on this, and there's rust filling this oil pressure gauge because the cab leaked so bad, that rain was getting in there so bad. If you got caught in a rainstorm, your legs and the seat was soaking wet, the dash, the cluster, the instruments, that's where that got all wet like that. Some of these are liquid filled and they'll leak, which that's also possible, but it looks to me like something broke off in the back here. I don't think that's because of the liquid. I think the gauge just got rusted and got damaged because of rainwater. In any event, there's not much of this that's any good. The whole thing's been hacked up over the years, repeatedly over and over and over. That voltmeter's not even the correct, someone cut that apart. It looks like maybe that was OEM and they cut the side off to fit the oil pressure gauge in there, but I should just throw it in the garbage. I'm thinking these gauges might come in handy. Maybe I'll pull them out of there and throw the rest in the garbage. But first I'm going to get my new cluster installed. Try to never throw anything away until you're past it. You don't need anything off of it anymore. All right, I got me some wire wheels. I'm going to try to do this first. We'll see how hard it is to get it off. Yeah, I might need to get a stripper for that. I don't think that's factory black. Maybe it is. because it's stuck on there pretty good. I was hoping it was going to flake right off because it was done by someone down the road, but this stuff is not wanting to come right off. Yeah, you have to figure out something else. I was hoping this was going to peel it right off because it looked like it was flaking. So I assumed this was painted by somebody and was silver originally. It must have been black. And since I've got my glove box back to chrome, I'm going to get this like looking chrome too, or at least nice and polished silvery. We'll see what we can come up with and get something more aggressive. I think these Scotch lock pads are doing pretty decent. I'm gonna see if I can do like a little bit of a machine turn finish. If you ever seen those, it's where circles overlap, kind of like fish scales. I'm gonna see if I can do something like that with it. If not, I'll have to just totally paint it silver. But I could do that and then clear coat it. That would look pretty nice if it'll work. Let's try it. These are wimpy. These are too wimpy. Let's get something tougher. I can hit it with this after stripping the paint. All right, this is a little aggressive, but now this might be a little too rough to try the finish I'm looking for. Let's go back to the Scotch lock, see what we can do. Not sure if that shows up on camera very well, but that's basically what I'm going for. It looks pretty decent. Not a show truck, not perfection, just something cool and a little interesting. And I'll clear over it when I get done going all the way around this thing. Try to make it look a little pretty. All right, let me wipe this down a little bit. I think it came out okay. It's probably not as cool as I was kind of hoping for, but it looks cool. It looks good, cool enough, let's put it that way. I think once I clear it, I'll have a better idea of what I think about it. You guys tell me what you think. Get you up close, personal here a little bit. That's what we're working with. I'm gonna do this for about 45 minutes worth of work, have it looking nice, and it'll kind of match the glove boxes, kind of beat up chrome. You guys, did I show you guys where I stripped the paint off and all that? Hopefully that video is up already. Let me go take a look tonight and make sure. I'll throw some clear on this so we can kind of preserve that finish a little bit. Wax and grease remover, you always want to put that on anything you're about to paint. Wipe it down a couple of times. I saved my old chamois from cars. I never wax the car with the chamois. I just use it for drying after washing and stuff. And those chamois I'll pull to the side to use for this when they're a little beat up. If you're going to do a real nice paint job on something, then use brand new, I'm calling them chamois, brand new detailing towels. They don't leave any lint behind and stuff like that. If you're going to do a paint job that's going to put a lot of hours in it, use brand new ones and wax and grease remover before you spray any paint. Otherwise you get all the little fish eyes, it doesn't stick, etc., etc. Let's get some clear and get this thing painted. This is pretty good enamel, UV resistant, high gloss, etc., etc. It's what I painted the dash with. I put some clear on that with this instead of with my gun. It works good. So I've been using it. This part of the cluster you're not going to see at all. Even this little top lip that I sanded, you're not going to see it. But if you're looking at the crack, at least you might see it and it'll look decent. Just a little tack coat, let that set up about 15 minutes and I'll spray another couple of coats on it. 15 minutes in between coats roughly. We're going to end this video here. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll torque the like button before you leave. Maybe subscribe if you're new. Hope I see you in the next video too, because you're awesome.